Well, okay, first of all, some ways our program is really interesting in that our first team will have like 30, 40, 50 kids. However, a lot of those teams, there are like 6 or 7 kids who are actually into stuff. And the other like 40 aren't into stuff. So if you take 40 kids who aren't actually interested in robots and tell them, I need you to sit in this seat for 8 hours and just watch matches, it's just not going to happen. I think we do a pretty poor job of recruiting within FIRST. I think, and rant time, we spend a lot of time preaching to the converted. So we get kids who are already interested in science, math, and technology, and they become the hardcore members of teams. And then, I don't know how it happens, we just get a lot of kids who are just looking for somewhere to go. And that, don't get me wrong, if we can provide an outlet for kids who are just looking somewhere to go, that's very important. If they learn things in this program, that's great. The best scouts I've ever seen are people who actually like watching matches, i.e. people that like watching sports. And probably should try and recruit some of those people in your team. This is how I joined a FIRST team. Literally, our high school had a robotics team. It's even before we were doing FIRST. And then someone was like, do you want to join? I was like, hell no. Are you kidding me? Freak show. Didn't want to be a part of it. A teacher on the team said, hey, no, I think you like this stuff. Like, we need someone with an eye for strategy. I know all you do is watch sports. Why don't you come and check this out? He appealed to a different side of me. And there's no coincidence that this teacher is now a championship winning Flowers Award winner. Because he was looking to get the most out of every student within his school, within his programs. And it was pretty cool. But the reason that scouting doesn't get respected, and the reason why kids don't want to scout, is kids want to do something if they feel that it's being seen as valuable. Too many teams use scouting as, I need a way to keep all these other 30 kids busy. Busy work, no one likes it. If you want people to scout, your team needs to create a culture where scouting is respected. From the top down, so the mentors and the student presidents have to actually buy into it. Scouting cannot be a refuge for the damned up in the stands. You want to get people who actually want to do it, and the data they produce, someone has to use it. Because, and I see this happen so many times, it just drives me crazy. So, a team will have 10 scouts in the stand, and they are just working their butts off, keeping track of every piece of information. And then for alliance selection, the drive team just does what they want. They're like, oh yeah, we think that team was good. You're the drive team, you've seen like 12 matches all weekend long. What do you even know? The scouts are the ones who know it. But if the scouts, once they feel discarded, why am I doing this? Why am I going to pay attention to every match? Because no one's reading this stuff. It's that same kind of trap that you fall into when you realize your teachers aren't reading your essays in school. Well, why am I going to put any time into it? So, it's really important that you, number one, create a culture where people respect scouting, and number two, make it fun. And on our team, one way we've made it fun is gambling. I mean, there's no other way of putting it out there. Not with real money, that's sometimes. But no, we have this thing called Sid Bucks, where it's fake money, it's a fake currency, and we set betting lines. It's like, okay, 2056 in this match, the over-under is at 17.5 toes. Do you think they're going to go over? Do you think you're going to go under? And we take these bets and whatever. And it really forces the scouts to actually pay attention. Because now they don't want to be making uneducated guesses. They don't want to throw your money down on that. And suddenly, it's now a game for them. And they have something. And we really try hard on our team to make sure that scouting is seen from the top down is really, really important. So I get this question all the time. And I think it's an important one. That's why I just spent this much time on it. And I mean, it comes back to passion and enthusiasm. Get at least some kids in there who are passionate about scouting, and their passion will spread to others, especially if they're leaders. And I mean, anyone who went through a Dean's List interview this year knows that one of the questions that will be asked is, what do you do to be a leader on your team? And leadership is about motivating others, and it's about setting an example. And you really... Kids will gravitate towards the most charismatic person on the team. And that's how leaders show charisma, they show passion, and they make everyone feel valued. And that's what we need to do with scouting. So that's my scouting talk. I don't actually need to teach you guys how to scout. I know we're running low on time here. How am I doing? 8:05, so like, yeah, 25 minutes. So let's, maybe we'll talk a little bit together. No, I don't want to talk about it. Try to find something good. Okay, alliance selection. This is actually good. How do you go through the alliance selection process? You need to create an alliance that is going to fulfill your objective, which is either this year, it's twofold. In most of your matches, you're trying to score the most points. In the finals, you're trying to win. I think a lot of teams go through alliance selection and they just pick the highest scoring robot. But it's not always going to work that way. Sometimes you need to find complementary roles. And through your scouting process, you need to always be evaluating what team will we work best. And I think that's something that people really miss on, because the amount of events I've seen this year where teams, you just have two robots that can put up mass amounts of stacks, but they're terrible with cans. It's just like, no, I think you just saw them as the highest scoring robots. And sometimes, if two robots aren't complementary, this year, us in 2056, we were not complementary at all. We were always trying to occupy the same space. They would try and do the landfill, they'd do it slow. But, and it ended up that we had to put a ramp on the field, and it was just, at the same time, we didn't want to play against them. Are you kidding me? No, they're the only team that will put a challenge up against us. Sometimes you take a less complimentary robot because you don't want to face them and you want to take them out of play. On the other hand, I see alliances making the mistake where they don't find that complementary alliance, and then all of a sudden they're sort of in trouble. I think the other thing that teams don't realize is that teams don't take enough risks during alliance selection, and then some teams take too many risks. If you are the #1 seed and you've just picked the #2 seed, with your last pick, don't take a risk. You're in control of this event. Take the safe and consistent team. One thing that we talk about a lot in scouting is, a lot of people are just like, what's the average points per match? What's the average points per match? What's the average? Forget about the average. What's the team standard deviation? I want a team with 24 selection that is absolutely consistent. That's someone that's not going to mess up. On the flip side, if you're in that position where you end up being the #8 alliance captain, you're going to go face, 254 and 1678, you're in danger. You got to come up with something crazy. This is where you take the high standard deviation teams. And not thinking about this year's game, but just in past games. If there's that team who's their scores are 0-1, 0-1, 7-0-1-1, maybe take them. Because maybe in a match, they hit a 7. And maybe there's another team who's 2-3, 2-3, 5. Grab them. Because they do a 7, they do a 5, and then suddenly maybe you have a chance of playing with them. But if you make the safe pick and you take the 3-4, 3-4, 3-4, and 2-3, 2-3, 2-3, you're done. You were done before the matches even start. There's no point in even playing them. Or you're going to be that obnoxious team that just sits there praying that their stacks fall over. You need to take risks. But when you take those risks, it's solely based on what other teams and what other alliances are being formed. And when you're the 8th alliance, you know what's above you right now. So you can make that decision on the fly. But don't be afraid to take risks. Breaking up alliances. So, I think this one gets a little emotional sometimes, because I think in the game theory world, if you're the #1 seed, you just, if you're the #1 seed and you know that #2 and #3 really, really want to get together, you should break them up. Just some people are oh, I don't like that strategy. But then, on the flip side of that is, some teams feel disingenuous asking a team inviting a team to an alliance knowing they're going to decline. Some people don't feel comfortable doing that. I don't, but it's just one of those weird things to think about. Alliance selection is just it's a weird piece of game theory, especially because this is really the only realm that it happens in. So we're still learning about it, we're still trying to figure out the nuances of it. But in 2013, the Citrus Circuits got to Einstein and almost won champs because is solely because they burned that division hardcore. And it was, a lot of people were angry at them about it. But you know what? They took their tears about being angry and wiped them out with a blue banner. So. Do we have any other questions right now in the audience? I think we can go about anything, a wide array of topics. And I see one up there from one of our lovely volunteers in the orange. At some point this weekend, you know we're calling all the volunteers creamsicles. Like, that's just going to become a thing. He's right there, the creamsicle up there.
You did say you make fun of people that ask questions, so
yeah.
good on that one.
And like, it's not you specifically, it's just the shirt that you happen to be wearing that makes you look like a tasty frozen treat.
It's actually a heliconia color underneath the orange. It's Team 696, the bright pink.
Nice.
Hey, question for you. I've been doing this for 14 years now, student turned mentor, turned teacher, program director. I consider my team a top 10% team, but it's a big jump to go from a top 10% team to a top 5%. You talked about the teams that consistently do too good to win each year, you know, making it to the semifinals, and strategically you could be better off building a simpler specialty robot, hoping to get picked by somebody higher. We're kind of in that zone where we consistently rank somewhere between 3 and 12, and it's almost like if you're not 1 or 2, you might as well be 20. What would you recommend for a team like ours?
Well, one, I would recommend that you write to the game design committee and tell them to get rid of the certainty draft, because that would solve a lot of these problems. I'm 100% serious. We incentivize teams to be the 24th best team at an event. That is a weird incentive system. Because you just said it right there. If you're not going to be 1 or 2, you might as well be 20. That is, and you are absolutely correct, but that is a weird incentive system that I've never really understood. So, I mean, how do you move from being like 3 through 12 to being 1 through 2? That is a tough question. That is, I mean, people always talk about what's the secret sauce? What keeps these teams up at 1 and 2 consistently year after year? And I think the biggest piece of the secret sauce for teams is to not lose lessons. So, what I've seen in Ontario, for example, over the past 3 years, has been a huge surge of teams who've taken it to the next level. And what I've noticed is they have a large number of returning college mentors. And this goes against what I was saying earlier when I said, kids, please focus on school. But so often a team will have great kids, and they graduate. And it's like they're restarting from the beginning. The best teams are drawing upon lessons learned from a huge amount of experience. So the question from our Young Dean's List winner over here, when we talked about how do we figure out what a reasonable number of points per match is going to be? And I said, look at past games. It's so much easier when you have people on your team who played that past game and lived it. If you're just cycling through kids year after year, that's harder to do. So having a mentor base that is, it's crazy now because First has been around for so long. There are so many mentors, and you'll see it this weekend with people's tags who are FRC alumni. And I think the number one way to get your team up to the next level is to have people come back year after year. Malcolm Gladwell talks about his 10,000 hour cliff, and you can really see that. What the theory is there is that you can't be an expert at anything without having spent 10,000 hours on it. It's impossible for a high school student to spend 10,000 hours on first. Well, impossible, man. They would be one weird kid. But you see teams who have the mentor base that have hit the 10,000 hour cliff, and it's just like, whoa, all of a sudden they're right there. I think Wave would be the best example. It just kind of was like, 28, 26 was just like this team that was like, whatever, whoa! 10,000 hour cliff. At least that's the theory that I have. I haven't actually talked to them about it or anything like that. But, so I think that's number one. Number two, I think it's really, really important if you want to be that top 5%, top 1% team, that you spend some time talking to those other teams who are in those categories. Because they may not be able to express what their secret sauce is, but you just need to watch. A lot of people always ask about, how did 2056 become so good so quickly? I can tell you the secret. their lead teacher spent the entire 2006 season shadowing 11-14. He came to our meetings, he just kind of watched and absorbed things. Their lead mentor was an 11-14 alum who went on over there. So I think a lot of teams, there's two types of teams in our program. There are the teams who just see the really good teams like, oh, I hate them, the mentors must build a robot. Well, you're an idiot. Like, just go out, go away. But there's a lot of teams who look up to these teams, which is cool, but they don't actually watch them and try and learn from them. And everyone says like, oh, I learned from here and here, but you really need to get intertwined to see the amount of hours that they put in and the techniques that they apply.
How many hours is it?
I mean, 11-14 operates very differently than pretty much any team at first, where the mentors only show up on weekends. St. Catharines is kind of this small town, it's like it's hard to develop a mentor base locally there. So most of the mentors are people who've gone to the University of Waterloo, been on either 11-14 or other first teams, and are living in Waterloo or Toronto, and we commute down for those weekends. On those weekends, we start going Saturday after work. So like the kids are in every day, from about 2 o'clock to at least 6 o'clock early in the season, and then maybe like 2 to like 10 it gets later. On the weekends, we go from the kids right after school, so 2 o'clock, and we go until about 1 a.m. And then we come back on Saturday, we start at 10, and we go until about 1 a.m. And then on Sunday, we start at 10, and then we go until about 6. But I mean, like this past weekend, I missed the whole Camberger thing. I was at this little Vex Worlds thing that just happened. But, little, it was massive. But, like, I was getting emails at 4 or 5 in the morning from kids testing Camberger stuff. The amount of hours can be immense. The practice time is one thing that I think teams don't recognize. The amount of time drive teams are practicing. But the other one is, there's a tendency for, okay, we finally finished the robot. It's put together, it works, it shot a ball, we're done. And with the best teams, they'll tell you the build season ends Saturday of championship, because they are constantly improving. I'd say that one thing on 11-14 that I think that we do better than any other team at first is we are willing to throw away working solutions. Because yes, it works, and it might have been good enough for us to win a regional, but it has to get better. And that tendency to just keep on working and never quit is really something that I think that those teams who are in that top 5% that you talk about is what they're doing. Just, it's never good enough. You have to constantly improve. And I see a lot of teams, man, I understand why. You just spent 6 weeks building a robot. It is hard. Kids have been not paying attention to their schoolwork. Mentors have not been paying attention to their, their significant others. And it just, it wears on you. At some point you just want to say, hands up, I'm done. I'm done. And so I think those are the kind of things that I'm thinking of. Does that kind of get to your question? Okay. Who else has got a question? Right here, front and center.
Hi, so you've talked a lot about planning and how you shouldn't just jump into immediately building a robot. What happens on the other side of that when you overplan and spend too much time planning?
That's a really good question. So, I do another presentation that talks about timelines for the build season. And I think that, put it this way, the less resources you have, the sooner you have to finish your plan. It doesn't necessarily mean you need to do less planning, but you need to start building something. So you have to pick a direction and just go with it, suck it up, and hope it's the right direction. Because the more time you spend, the teams that do best are the teams that get their robots done early and have more time to practice. Like, there's no coincidence that, for us, we feel this is the most successful season we've had since 2008. And it's no coincidence this is the earliest we finished our robot. We pretty much had things working and doing stuff at week 4. Now going back to that question, we didn't just stop. We kept improving, and it's, but on the other hand, I think teams who have more resources can afford to take a little bit longer planning time and spend more time prototyping things and trying to get things just right, because they know that they have the luxury of having a practice robot they can tweak with afterwards. But if you're a team, and I hate to use the term low resource team, because I think a lot of times we forget that a low resource team is actually a standard resource team. So a team with no practice bot, a team that works 3 to 4 nights a week, I really think that you should have a plan executed in the first 4 or 5 days of the build season, and then go from there and just attack it. And just, whatever you've picked, do it awesome. As opposed to spending more time trying to do more things. Also, the more time you spend planning, the longer you let it go, the more you're going to let extra functions creep in. If you cut, oh yeah, your eyes just jumped so far out of your head. You were like a 3D movie right there. Holy bro, Jim Carrey's daughter is here. That is awesome. All right, other questions? Let's get the microphone to my friend from 610. Now, you guys see me like 5 times a year, so you can just ask me this stuff anytime. But, you know.
So you talked about after 4 years, you have teams that reset, and you have grade 9s become grade 12s. And we have a lot of grade 12s and teams who are really talented, and they have this huge knowledge base. So what would you recommend is the best way of getting that knowledge base from the graduate into the heads of our grade 9s and 10s?
Well, it's a tough question to ask me right now, because if you asked me this in January, I would have said it's really important to ensure that every senior student gets paired with a grade 9 student for the whole season. And so that there's going to be a whole download of data right there. I mean, the other one is how comfortable are teams with their alumni coming back to help out in some way. I know there's some teams for very good reasons do not allow their alumni to come back. In 11-14, what we do is we have a junior mentor program where our alumni come back, but the first 2 years, we don't call them actual mentors. And it's not like a hazing or demeaning sort of thing. But it's very difficult for us to go to a parent and try and explain, hey, this kid who was on the team last year is now responsible for the safety of your daughter. Like, that's just, but it's really important that young students get paired with older students on the team, so there can be a data download throughout the season. But also, and I don't know, like, just throwing ideas off the top of my head, maybe after the season, like maybe in like April, May before they graduate, there should be a special challenge created by the grade 12 students that they give to the grade 9 students, and the grade 9 students can learn from them in that way. Like if you have a really strong graduating class, you want to use that. Now one thing I found is, and this happens to our team a lot too, we have this wicked awesome grade 12 class, and we're all like, what are we going to do without them? What's going to happen? But I find that first teams, I find that the ability of students expands to fill a vacuum. And it's kind of like that whole thing when you chop some big trees down, other things grow from underneath it. Every time we have a massive crop of grade 12s graduate who are just awesome and rock stars and Dean's List winners, the next crop suddenly just grows. Because they've been learning behind the scenes the whole time, but they've been afraid to speak up, or maybe they've even been pushed out of the way because these rock star grade 12s have been doing everything. But all of a sudden, when they're gone, the younger students are like, it's my moment to shine. And all these skills that you didn't realize they had just shows up. I mean, it was really evident for us after 2012. We had this massive graduate. It was the best graduating class that we've ever had. Now they're like all doing awesome things. And we were just like, we thought we were toast after that. But then this next group just came up and it ended up being better than that group. And it just, you'd be surprised at how much the grade 9s are absorbing from you right now. Because if the grade 12s are that awesome, they are being not just technically savvy, but they're being leaders, and people look up to leaders. Next question, right here in the blue. Making you work out here, man. You're going to win your Fitbit challenge this weekend.
How does 11-14 approach the pre-match strategy meeting, making sure everyone knows what they need to do, and make sure no one gets in anybody else's way?
Well, the most important thing that I think we do in the pre-match strategy meeting is, it's not our place to make sure things happen. The one thing I want to make sure is that all 3 teams are doing something that they want to do in a match. It is a significant pet peeve I have, especially with, and this is why some people have some angst towards the teams. I think there's a lot of teams that just walk into strategy sessions and assume that I'm the best robot, I'm telling you all what to do. That's no fun for us. That's not why we're here. You can have a winning strategy where all teams get to contribute something. And so the first thing you need to do is ask your partners, what do you want to do this match? How do you think you can best contribute to us winning this match? Once you get that established, remember when I talked about with passion and enthusiasm? Teams will do better at something they want to do in the match as opposed to you forcing them into doing something. So number one, try and get everyone doing something that they want to do. Number two, you've got to be very clear about what's going to be happening during the match. And especially when you talk about making sure people don't get in each other's ways, you need to make sure that everyone knows where everyone's going to be. I rarely ever see teams that intentionally get in each other's way. I think it's a lack of communication. So I think it's key, the more communication there is pre-match, and especially in this year's game, because it's not very dynamic. There's no defense that's going to get in your way. There's less surprises. You can plan out paths in advance and kind of work through that. So it's about communication, planning, and making sure everyone's on the same page. Other questions? This gentleman right here. Sorry guys in the back, I'm probably not looking up at your questions because the lights are so bright on me, you know? Okay.
So you've talked about how you decide what roles your machine is going to play in a game, and how you prioritize and all that. Now comes kind of like what this lady here was saying, you got to do the last part of your planning, the detail planning, and then deciding how to actually implement it. So we've got a lift, you've got a lift, so does a lot of other people have, that have lifts. We've got one that's all right. Other people like yours works really, really well. Now, how do you decide the specifics of, okay, how do we implement this lift mechanism? Do we use pneumatics? Do we use chains?
Well, I mean, my easy answer for that is going to be, I have really good kids who just do that for me. But I think, like, if you talk about our lift specifically, so we look back at our 2008 season, where one of our things was, we never wanted to stop moving. We wanted to hurdle, get a ball, and just never stop moving. The whole concept behind our lift was, we never wanted our lift to have to stop. So that's why we did the continuous loop that just go around. Not this whole, like, I pick up a toad and so it was the whole kind of, it was a strategic plan to try and make sure that there was no stopping time. So that's part strategy. But I think part of it is effective prototyping, seeing what works, what doesn't work, trying different concepts, and then optimizing. Because I think a lot of teams at a certain point just kind of said, my lift is what my lift is. This is where it's going to be, and this is what it's going to be. In terms of the mechanical side, I'm really not the best person to speak to that. When we talk about specialization, I have specialized in a whole other world, and coming to me for mechanical advice would just not be the best sort of thing. So I don't know if I can address your question in that way, but I think it's about having a goal and always be willing to optimize things and taking risks in the design process and not being afraid to throw away an idea. So just because something's working as is, maybe it could be faster. Like, we've had this discussion this season. We're like, you know what? Can we speed the lift up anymore? And like, this is after like people are saying fastest lift, whatever. It's like, no, let's try to speed it up. In 2013 with our hanger, we started off with the 15-second hanger, which was pretty much faster than anyone. But by the time we got the champs, it